you see Silicon Valley companies, this state layer is where the battle is. $1 trillion companies would be built.
Even if currently the agentic solutions are doing well, if you do not make some long-term strategic choices well, it would in fact put you in a long-term strategic risk.
If you don't own that intelligence in the era where we are moving towards AGI, you would lose your competitive advantage. If you don't own it, somebody else owns it.
Hi Pratap, good morning.
Hi Anmol, morning, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Good to have you again for the talk show.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So, this is a second series of a conversation that we do about what we are building at Nagent, how we are building, how those solutions can help different enterprises or different prospects unlock value. And we don't just keep this conversation to talk about Nagent, but we talk about the overall agentic architecture on how the landscape is evolving, what is going well, where the challenges are being faced either by us or the industry in general. So, last time when we did that podcast or that talk series, we largely talked about Nagent, how the Nagent's idea came, what were the reason that you chose this particular industry for your entrepreneurial journey, how you had to make pivots very early in your start of the company, what market insights you got that made you change, why you made some architectural choices, some specific use cases, what are the industry segments that you think are having the easy use cases to unlock value. We talked largely about that. In today's talk, I want to talk about something more long term, right? Moving beyond the architectural landscape of immediate usable solution, we'll talk about how this landscape will evolve and what are some of the considerations the enterprises need to do so that they remain ahead of the curve in the long run.
So yeah, in this context, Anmol, I would like to point to one particular thing. What is an agent, first of all? Let's bring that understanding. So if you look at the broad industry categorization, there are, let's say, 4 levels of agents, right? And let's first tell that for our audience's benefit. The highest level at which agents are going to become a reality is what we call, let's say, AGI or artificial general intelligence, where these autonomous systems would be able to do things without human intervention.
Right.
That's the fully autonomous agentic AI, right? Now, that's something which is going to happen. We are at a very, very early stage when it comes to fully autonomous AI.
Yeah.
Now, before that, let's say there are level 4. If we look at level 4 agentic AI, then these are multi-agent systems which are not fully autonomous but semi-autonomous, which can run and take human approval,
Right.
for, let's say, certain things that it would do. So this is level 4, where the industry is more or less there, where certain aspect of the work agent is able to do without human intervention. So that's level 4. If we go one step down to level 3, these are essentially agentic systems, or these are actually where agents become agents, where they have access to tools, they have access to intelligence, they are able to plan, do things. But here, human is most likely initiating the task, right? So that's where we were in 2025 predominantly. Now, before that, we can, level 2 and level 1, we can talk about a single agent workflow where it is designed to do a particular task, which is level 2. Level 1 is what we know as custom GPTs, where it is one model, again human initiated. So that's a history now.
Right.
So when we talk about level 4 and level 5 agentic AI, particularly level 5 agentic AI, where things should move in next 1-2 years, hopefully, and probably prior to that, depending on how the industry is shaping, right? It is very important for us to understand how things should look like in next 2 years. Looking at the evolution that generative AI and agentic AI have had over the last couple of years, and the kind of investment that is pouring in, the industry is going to change significantly. And enterprises, or let's say leaders who are in charge of leading AI adoption in their organization need to understand this topic very, very well, how the work is going to change. So when the nature of work is going to change, some of the work would be done by humans and some of the work would be done by agents. Hence the workplace is going to change or transform rather, right? So both workplace and worker are going to change. And in this context, I think it becomes very important for enterprises to have their competitive advantage built so that they can win in the agentic era.
Right.
Yeah. So that's predominantly why we want to talk about it, educate people, educate leaders about how they should perceive the future.
So, Pratap, you explained this very well, how the agentic system or agentic landscape is most likely to evolve from level 1 agents to level 2 to level 3, level 4. Level 4 or something is like autonomous or semi-autonomous, and then it would go to even further agentic and further autonomous, and the peak is the AGI. Right? So, like you said, every company would be planning to go from level 1 to level 5. That would be the vision and ambition of every company. There is no other company which would say that we don't want to go agentic. So like you said, to plan that journey and to plan that journey sustainably and successfully, they need to make some good, clear-cut, long-term choices that would help. Right? So I would structure this conversation based on a blog that you had written, wherein you talked about a concept of sovereign agentic intelligence and how would that help enterprise plan their journey. So we'll come to that topic specifically, but the way you have written that blog, that intrigued me to have this conversation with you. So like you said in that blog, say AI adoption is increasing significantly. Like for some it is stage 1, for some it is stage 5, right? Many times we used to see the POCs were working well, but the agent used to fail in production. For that, there were many reasons. Either the system was not very modular, the system design was not good, maybe the evaluation system is not good. But okay, let's consider a company for the time being has cracked that part, and that agentic solution is actually delivering value. You have a very smart chatbot, you have some sort of automation, you have a business intelligence tool that is incorporating data from multiple sources, and you are getting a unified single source of truth, doing well. But then you argue in your blog that even if currently the agentic solutions are doing well, if you do not make some long-term strategic choices well, it would in fact put you in a long-term strategic risk. So that is, I think, is the most important thing that I want to talk about. So why don't you start with that the default option which the enterprises are currently using for building agents or using agents, even if they are currently using successfully, why is that for you a concern, and why you think it could create a trap for them?
Yeah. So I think I spoke about how the workplace and worker is going to change in the future. And when that happens, when the worker and workplace changes and agents come into the workforce and do most of the work that humans were doing. Now, in that process, when they are doing work, a lot of intelligence gets generated. Yeah. Like it happens in a team environment. When a team works, there is certain intelligence that gets generated. Similarly, it is going to happen with agents.
Right.
And unlike humans, the amount of intelligence or the amount of data that is going to get generated through the agent runs are going to be immense, because everything is digital. In human, most part was not digital. So most of the knowledge was not captured, or captured in a very messy way, right? The knowledge was captured in email threads, in Slack chats, in WhatsApp conversations, in meetings which happen in one-on-ones or team meetings, right? Most of the decisions gets taken in those conversations, and this conversation was not getting recorded, or the intelligence out of that was not getting recorded in the previous era. But imagine when the agents are doing it, all the things can be traced and put into an evaluation loop. And when that happens, the decisions that were taken by the agent becomes your intelligence. the company's intelligence, right? And these decisions can be influenced by static data like SOPs that company might have, SOPs or policies that companies might have, plus the conversation that happens when the agent is running. The agent might pull data from multiple sources, right? That's why I still want to focus on what is an agent before going into sovereign AI. So let me come back to sovereign AI, how this intelligence becomes important, and and this intelligence has sovereignty. If you don't own that intelligence in the era where we are moving towards AGI, you would lose your competitive advantage, because if you don't own it, somebody else own it.
Right.
So that we will come back to that, but let's understand what an agent is.
So I'll just refer to what you essentially said, that now the signals to capture intelligence is quite high. Why? For two reasons you said. Firstly, most of the all agentic runs have a very good digital traceability. So you could sense what input was given, what output was given, what was the intermediate output. So there's very good activity log. And secondly, you were saying because the models, the LLMs,
activity log might not be there in default. Many of the agentic solutions do not have these activity logs at this point of time. But let's assume that the people who are advanced, they are using these activity logs and evaluations and everything they are recording and making something out of that, right? But by default it is not there yet.
Right. So that's a one big differentiator. Any platform, any solution which has a very comprehensive logging and activity log, that is the way forward. And second thing you said, because the agentic intelligence has increased so much, we could capture insights out of unstructured data, be it WhatsApp conversations, meeting notes, email threads, which was not that earlier. So there's a lot more input fodder material to build that intelligence layer.
Correct, absolutely. So if we understand, we'll come back to the question that you are asking, right? So essentially, what is intelligence? Intelligence, like your brain only, right? If garbage goes into your brain, if your brain is trained on wrong set of information that you receive, then the way brain would process and the output that you will get would not be right, because the input has not been right. Same goes with intelligence as such. If your input is not the correct input or not complete input, then the response or the action that the agent would do might not be the most optimal one, right? So we will come back to this, why this, I think this is a very, very big topic. We will take a little bit of time to explain. So before explaining this intelligence that gets generated, let's understand what an agent is in quick terms, right? So agent is an autonomous software entity. It is a software entity which has 4 key ingredients, and this agent is able to think, able to plan, able to take decisions, and able to act. And when this whole process is happening, it consumes a lot of data, it generates a lot of tokens, which is again data, right? So there are 4 key ingredients, if you see. One is LLM, which is the brain.
Correct.
So this is one layer where some bit of intelligence is there, and not all companies would be able to have their own LLM. Though people are trying, but it's difficult because we don't know what would happen. But that's just one part of the intelligence. The second key ingredient where this brain gets the input is the static knowledge, which probably when we are creating a workflow or a system, agentic system, you provide that input or that knowledge to the agent, which could be a document, a SOP, a bunch of PPTs, a set of data, or an Excel file, right? Which is your static data. Or this data can be pulled from your system of record like CRM and stuff like that and fed into the agent. That is the second key ingredient. Third key ingredient is your action layer, where based on the data and the intelligence from the model, the agent would take certain action. This happens at the tooling layer, which could be a CRM, a email provider, or a communication provider, any of these tools, right? So when this is happening, a lot of data again getting exchanged. The fourth and most important one to make it autonomous is how do you get intelligence or the intelligence out of what is happening in the whole process. If the agent is iterating for 10 times, it is taking certain decisions. What are those decisions? Why those decisions were taken? Right? And out of whatever has happened, how do you extract intelligence is the fourth part, which happens through a feedback loop. We'll talk more about it, right? Now, when these 4 layers of technology comes together, where does intelligence really stay? Is it at the model layer? Is it at the tool layer? Or is it at the feedback layer? And who owns that, right? That's what particularly sovereign intelligence. If you own that particular intelligence that is getting generated when work is happening through agentic system, and if you are able to improve that intelligence over a period of time, and if you own it, you would win.
So, yeah, beautifully explained the different layers. So what essentially you are saying, in an agentic system, there are different layers, right? One is the model layer, which will be very few LLM providers in the world, at least as of today. Future also, we don't see a big, huge increase in number of LLM providers. Then there is the tooling layer, which also, that will, so the second is the data layer, which is the static knowledge of the industry, of the company, of your clients, customer, etc. The third is the tooling layer, wherein based on the analysis, intelligence, you are prompting some action. You want to create a new entry in your CRM, you want to trigger a mail, you want to save an entry, right? So these 3 things are some ingredients. But here you are not owning anything. You are saying the big focus area for enterprise should be the 4th layer, which is the reasoning, feedback, or the loop, the reasoning loop.
Yeah, the industry call it something called state layer.
State layer.
Right, which involves your reasoning traces, your decision traces, right, your essentially anything which has to do why a particular thing was done, why a particular decision was taken, right? That's the state layer that I am talking about. Okay. And see, this state layer is a evolving layer. It is not static, unlike the static data that you might have, right? So this state layer can have multiple inputs. Just to give you an example, let's say I run an agentic system to run my performance marketing ads,
right,
from the marketing context, right? So it involves multiple things. First, let's say if I am using Google and Meta platforms to run my ads, then I get a lot of data from these platforms, which
engagement
metrics, the ad metrics, right? And that becomes one data point, right? Now, when this data gets analyzed by agent, and based on this data, this agent finds out certain insights, and based on that, certain actions. Let's say campaign budget has to be changed, if that is the decision, or if a creative needs to be refreshed, that could be another decision, right? Or a new campaign could be created. Now the agent takes that decision. How does the agent took that decision? Because that decision was taken, and that decision might be right, might be wrong, but if you don't understand why this decision was taken and why it was right, and if you can't replicate the right ones over a period of time, then your agentic system would not become self-learning and autonomous. You always need to correct it, it would always drift, right? So that is the state layer that we are talking about. So I think beyond what we are seeing in the industry, if you see Silicon Valley companies, this state layer is where the battle is. People like Foundation Capital, Jaya Gupta has been saying about this concept called context graph, right? Which is essentially the state layer. This is where the hypothesis of them is trillion-dollar companies would be built out of this context layer or context graph that, particularly for enterprises. And this context graph or context layer or the state layer or enterprise intelligence, whatever you call it, there would be a lot of systems that would be built around it, and these systems would not be with your LLM providers,
right?
Because then the learning is not owned by the enterprise but the vendor.
I think this is very good. And I now understand why you keep coming to this topic, because in the last podcast also when I asked you what do you think is Nagent's mode, or what is your best favorite piece of tech architecture, for both the answers, both the questions you had largely mentioned the self-learning agents or multi-layer contextualization. So that's why that's coming into your blogs, into your thought capital. So I'll just rephrase again what you just said, that you are saying the state layer is the big battle layer for enterprises, primarily for 4 reasons. One, you said that as we read in many reports, there is issue of AI explainability. AI or an agentic system might be giving an output, but if you are not convinced so on what was the reasoning for that decision, what was the activity log, what were the ingredients, what made the agentic system recommend something, the confidence in that recommendation would be less. So if you build that state layer very well through multiple signal, AI explainability will improve. Secondly,
I'd just like to add, it is not just about explainability. It is about, again, intelligence, right? I'll give you an example. Yesterday I was reading a blog from Anthropic applied AI research team. Okay. So they were experimenting with a coding agent and they were trying to make it autonomous. So this person who was leading this particular thing, he ran an agent which was supposed to build a whole website, a web application. Now, there are a lot of elements in this application which are subjective, and there would be few which are objective in nature, right? Objective, evaluating an objective action or an objective output is easy.
Yeah.
2 plus 2 is equal to 4. If it is giving 4, yes, this is right. If it is giving 3, it is wrong.
Yeah.
Right? But there are subjective elements which agentic AI is able to do. Something like, okay, let's say I'm making a website. How should the front end look like? How should the messaging look like? There is no right or wrong answer in that.
Yes.
It's very, very subjective in nature, right? Now, when there is subjective outputs that needs to be evaluated, it happens in an iterative way. Correct? Now, how does an agent decide which option to go with? Let's say the agent run 10 iterations, 10 different type of UX gets generated. Every UX is good. Now the agent has to choose one, and the agent chose one.
Yeah.
How did it happen is the question. Because this is where the agent is taking certain decisions on itself, right? And it goes through a loop. Obviously, one agent would do the coding, another agent would do the evaluation, right? And based on that evaluation, certain feedback would go, and the first agent would change certain things. Now, in that whole process, certain intelligence got generated when the agent decided that, okay, let's go with this version which got generated in 10th iteration.
Right.
How did that happen?
Yeah.
That is the thing. Not only the analysis of it, but the decision making logic or the decision making regions. That is something which we need to understand in this context.
So these have been very fascinating insights, Pratap. So what I understand is the state layer, which enables this multi-step or multi-dimensional reasoning capabilities, and also gives autonomy to the enterprise, that they own that intelligence or that context. Building this is a big strategic choice, because this is something that compounds over a time. So it's the type of platform that you choose, the architectural design that you do, the solutions that you adopt. Any enterprise, the decision makers must be mindful of these considerations when they make that choice. And I'm sure, based on many conversations with you, that you had expected that this trend will come, and this layer is one that will make the real difference to the enterprise in the long run. So when you were conceptualizing Nagent, or when you were building its architecture, this is something you had kept in mind. So now I want to talk something about our platform. So we have 2 proprietary technologies for which we have filed patent, which in a way addresses this requirement or this concern for the company in the long run. So I want to know from you about both our technologies, which is Agent Smriti and Karmic Feedback Loop, on how these 2 architectural pieces addresses this concern of loss of autonomy for the enterprises.
So we spoke about four ingredients of the agents, right? LLM tools, then the memory, and fourth one is the feedback or the intelligence that goes in.
Yeah.
Right. So this agent Smriti plays at the third layer, which is at the memory layer.
Right.
And Karmic Feedback Loop plays at the intelligence layer, where based on the previous runs, based on the data that you receive from the environment or the feedback that you receive, the agent's intelligence improves, right? So these two technologies can essentially make an agent to level 5. Now I'll
Okay.
give you a brief context starting with agent Smriti.
Yeah.
So Smriti in Indian context is little beyond memory. The insight out of that memory is what Smriti. What gets remembered is Smriti, right? What gets retained by the mind is Smriti. So we have taken that concept from there, and that's how we have branded it. But the whole technology behind is a memory architecture,
Yeah.
essentially, which consists of static memory, which you get,
Yes.
plus the knowledge that you receive when some work is getting done, and basically when that is happening, how do you get insight? That insight is what is Smriti. Smriti has essentially four components. One is the decision traces.
Yeah.
Like we were discussing earlier, when this process is happening, how the agent is taking decisions and what thoughts went in and what decision were made and why that decision is made.
Right.
That's one layer. Then when this workflow is happening, the understanding the context of that workflow, when this piece of work is happening, what is the context of the whole enterprise of the person who is doing it, right? So the context has again three layers to it. One is the operator layer, right?
Yeah.
We are talking about an era where human and AI would collaborate, and there would be human managers who would manage a team of AI agents. So the context of the human manager also matters.
Yes.
So as the context of the enterprise in which this human manager and AI agents are working, right? And the third context and most important context is the agent's context itself, right? So when we combine these three level of context and the insight out of that is what is called Smriti. And that's not plain memory, because if people term memory as a complete log. That's a data, not memory, right? And when you put that context into an agent, when it is running, there is a context window problem that we will hit.
Yes.
Obviously, there are models which can take 2 million context, but imagine the input cost, right? If the agent is running 100 times and if the input cost for 1 million context is $3, then $300 you spend in a single day for a single agent, right? Now, so effectively you can't put the whole context into the brain.
Entire context may not be useful for the next run.
And we have seen research that there is context drifting that happens if the context window is more.
Correct.
The agent would give importance to something which might not be important. So
Right.
getting the distilled insight as a context and passing that context to the agent when it is running, that is where your output improves. And we have seen in our internal research that this helps, right? So that is what is agent Smriti. Not just the logs, not just the decision traces, but insights mined from that particular data that the agent generates is what is Smriti. And that's a condensed version of memory.
Basically, it's a dynamic thing which has some component of the static or the fixed knowledge base or the SOPs and documents, and the bigger part is the acquired wisdom or acquired knowledge based on agent runs, based on logs, based on decisions, based on different sort of signals.
Correct.
Yeah. So basically, for an enterprise in the long run, through recurring compounding, this agent Smriti will keep on building.
So you are right that agent is a continuous, it's not static, it is continuous, it evolves over a period of time. And this is how the naming itself we have taken from a Sanskrit, Smriti is a Sanskrit word, which means that which is remembered and understood. That's the literal meaning of Smriti.
Yeah.
That which is remembered and understood. And it was made for humans. Something which is remembered by humans so that when they're taking decisions, it comes to their mind.
Right.
And which is understood. If they don't understand, the decisions would be wrong. Same thing if you apply it to an agent. The agent should be able to remember what is important, and it should understand the whole thing behind it, right? So that's Smriti, and it is persistent in nature. It is not static. So whenever the agent is running, this Smriti gets updated, and that's how it becomes a living memory system for the agent.
Right. No, again, very interesting.
And also, like, for example, when we go to an organization to work, right, it takes us some time to learn about the organization, to learn about the context of the organization, how the decisions are happening, right? Now that and as we keep working in that company, our Smriti or our understanding of that organization improves, and hence our decision making improves. Same can apply to agent. As the agent is introduced to the organization for the very first time, the Smriti would be very small or very static. But as the organization or the people inside the organization start deploying more agents, the Smriti gets developed. The whole concept of Smriti and Karmic is taken from, again, Indic scriptures. So it while Smriti gets the name from what I just explained, Karmic take inspiration from the concept of karma, which is basically related to action and the consequence of that action. The consequence we might not have control. What we have control is on action, right? So this Karmic Feedback Loop introduces something called action-defined reformation. That's the core technology, right? When an agent takes an action, there is a consequence to that action. It could be, if we come back to the digital marketing concept that we were discussing, if an agent changes the budget of a campaign, that has a consequence. The campaign might, the performance of the campaign might go up, go down, and that is the consequence. Now, based on the action, what consequence happened and what can happen based on your previous karma. Previous karma is nothing but what had happened before, right? And so this is where the connection between Karmic and Smriti happens. When an action is happening, it is happening because there is a context to it, and that context is what we are capturing and passing through Smriti. And then the action happens, and that action has a consequence. How do we capture that consequence? And based on the consequence that happened or the result that we get, how do we update our memory or the context or agent Smriti so that the same thing doesn't get repeated? And this would go in a cycle.
Basically sending both positive reinforcement signals as well as negative reinforcement signals.
And updating your context every time the agent is running. And if we do it right way, if we do the right parameter setting here, then the output that we expect would improve over a period of time. Right? If the current agent's performance is 90%, and if you want to increase that 90% to 98%, it would not happen on 1 or 2 days. This would require significant feedback loop that gets attached and the context getting improved. And once that happens, then the reformation happens. So Karmic has 6 layers. So Karmic stands for knowledge acquisition and reformation of multi-agent iterative correction. So first is knowledge acquisition. How does knowledge acquisition happens? It happens through 3 sources. One is what the human manager tells as a feedback. The second one is what the agent receives from the environment. And in our case of digital marketing or performance marketing, it is the signal that it receives from Google Ads, Meta Ads, or any other ad platform, right? And the third one is what the AI agent feels. So there are 3 levels of evaluation that we put, and from there knowledge acquisition happens. And once that knowledge acquisition happens, it gets passed to the Smriti, and the next agent run happens, right? Then the second part of the karmic is knowledge acquisition and reformation of multi-agent iterative correction. Next step is reformation. Now what are we reforming? We can reform the 4 ingredients of an agent.
Yeah.
Either we can reform the model that we are using, if that is required, or the model parameter, right, which could be prompt, your temperature, your settings.
Right.
Second could be you can change the tool or the action within that tool.
Right.
If that is not the right action, if let's say changing campaign budget was not the right action, but changing the creative was the right action, then that happens at the tooling layer, right?
Yeah.
So that is the second ingredient. Third ingredient is your memory, which we talked about, Smriti, right? If that gets changed, then again the performance can get changed.
Correct.
Or fourth one is how do you reform this whole concept of creating this feedback system, the parameter of the which parameter you have to give more importance, which parameter you have to give less importance, right? So this is where reformation happens. Then based on this reformation, how do you go ahead and iteratively correct the multi-agent workflow system? So once you decide, okay, this is the reformation that needs to happen, then are you able to go and dynamically change the 4 parameters that we talked about?
Right.
If you are able to do that in an intelligent way, then your agent performance would improve, and that is what is essentially a learning organization or intelligent organization, which is able to improve its performance from what it was yesterday to today, and there is active learning that is happening.
Right.
So that's what Smriti and Karmic put together would be able to solve for enterprises.
This is really fascinating. So what you are essentially saying is that Karmic feedback layer, that architectural piece, takes in signals from multiple sources, be it from external engagement metrics, feedback from a human, reinforced learning by human feedback, or a meta agent which would evaluate the outcome. All the signals will be then fed back, and based on that, either we can make changes to the model, either you go for fine tuning if required, or you just change the model parameters, be it temperature or the prompt, or you make changes in the tool selection or the tooling, or you update your agent Smriti. So that loop keeps on going, right? And like you said, the different agent runs, different users will have different weightage from different sources. So the weightages gets updated based on real signals.
Correct.
Right? So one very interesting thing which I would add here is, which I got to know from our engineering and product team, is the way we have designed this Karmic feedback loop is to make it very intuitive and user friendly. In a way, what example that came out, that we capture both explicit as well as implicit signals. Explicit signal could be engagement metrics, you have clear hard data, right? Or maybe a human has rated it, thumbs up, thumbs down, or rating 2 out of 5, 3 out of 5, or he or she has given some specific output. I didn't like the quality of image, it was too wordy, it was too verbose. So these are explicit signals. But then we are also capturing implicit signals. In a sense, if a person is downloading the final output, it's an implicit signal that the output was good. Or if it's a multi-stage agent, in the third stage, if the user is doing a retry, that's an implicit signal that the stage output of the previous stage was not good. The user is not explicitly mentioning it. So in a way, we are capturing more and more instances wherein we could build these signals. So I think...
And I think, see, we are doing it, and this is important to do, right? But when we talk about sovereign agentic AI, which was our original topic of discussion, right? When these signals are getting captured, this is creating that intelligence that we spoke about. And this intelligence, on the implicit signals, explicit signals, and the outcome of those signals, right? Or the things that we can which the agent can remember and understand, right? Which is the Smriti. Now, this Smriti becomes the core intelligence, not the model layer, not the tooling layer, because in tomorrow's world, enterprises should not be dependent on a single model, right? If they are dependent, good luck to them, because there are great amount of risk involved there, right? So I'm assuming rational organizations should have multi-LLM strategy. Now, so they cannot rely on a single LLM to hold that intelligence, that's a big risk, right? Now, the second layer which they can go to their cloud providers. And who are these cloud providers, right? These, again, if you give the intelligence to them, then again, it is good. You can do that, but there is a risk, right? The third layer is, okay, fine, I'll go with an orchestration layer and I'll plug in some external memory tool. That's also great. You can do that. But there is also certain risk because you are, till this point, you are not owning your intelligence.
Right.
That is where we introduce something called sovereign intelligence, where this knowledge you own. You can take out that knowledge at any point of time. And the knowledge is very simple. It is skill files. It is knowledge files, right? Essentially text data.
Yeah.
And the way we are implementing this in an enterprises is in a method where the whole system stays within your VPC, your cloud. And the learning at any point of time you can take out. Nagent would have no say in that. And we don't train our system based on this knowledge. But your agents, every time it is running, it is using that knowledge or that Smriti, which is the intelligence layer. And that's the crux of sovereignty, agentic AI that I am talking about.
Right. And like we discussed this multiple times in the podcast, that this is an exercise which will yield significant results only upon compounding. So the choices of the tech stack that leadership has to make has to be very conscious, because you cannot have a platform or an architectural design which doesn't have these layers, and you cannot have a system, okay, I'll run it for 5 years and then I will come to a system which has all these layers. So essentially those 5 years of agent run, you have lost the insight that you could take from them. So the architectural choices have to be very conscious.
And I'll give you an example from one of the client conversations that we were having last week. So that is fresh in my memory.
Yeah.
So this company is in very advanced stage of generative AI implementation.
Right.
Okay, it's a financial services company.
Yeah.
So they have implemented few agentic solutions. They were very early in their journey. It took them 2 years. Now these use cases are in production where they are seeing significant value.
Okay.
But one of the challenges that their head of AI was telling is these are disjointed systems.
Okay.
They don't talk to each other. They don't learn from each other. Right? This company has a chat agent which they have put it into their website. This is a silo. Then there is a credit monitoring agent that is in another silo. Right? If they don't talk to each other, of course they have to talk to each other with proper governance and control, access and control, right? But currently the infrastructure on which they have built is not designed to have that cross learning within their enterprise, right? So there is agent learning which is happening, but there are two other layers that we spoke about: the enterprise context and the user context. These two are not getting captured.
Yeah.
And this is where they are facing the challenge of scaling these. And this is being realized by only people who are at a higher level of maturity in their AI adoption. But people who are at a lower end of AI adoption, they are still not talking about agents. They are putting interns to experiment with agentic AI, and it would go nowhere. It has to be driven at a CXO level, at a CEO level at least, if people want to make those decisions.
Right.
Yeah.
So, as a final takeaway, what should the enterprise leaders do? Right? Suppose either they are experimenting with AI or they have not started their AI journey and they want to go big in next couple of years or say next year. What are 3-4 major steps that you would say that would ensure that they get value, at the same time their sovereignty is maintained?
Yeah, I think the first thing is they should definitely do more. They should become AI ready first, because not every company is agentic AI or AI ready. And to become AI ready, you have to make your systems, you have to make your data, you have to enable your people to do it, right? Unless you are ready, no matter what you implement, it is not going to work.
Yeah.
So become AI ready, change your strategy. That is the first point. Second point is, of course, do a lot of experimentation, but have a clear strategy on your AI roadmap, and based on that roadmap, choose the right platform.
Okay.
Right? If your roadmap is owning the intelligence, then definitely come to us, is what I will say, right?
Yeah.
But if you want to experiment, there are probably 10 players who can help you with that. We can also help you with that.
Yeah.
If you want to get small things done, go to vertical agents, go to model platforms, do work, get some efficiency, get in the buy-in, but have a clear strategy on next 2 to 5 years, how we are going to become agentic.
Yeah.
Because this is true, this is not hype anymore. If you would have asked me in 2024, that time situation was different.
Yeah.
Now agentic AI is actually giving results, actually improving efficiency and impacting bottom line.
Yeah.
Right? So I think people who are laggard should find out how can they adopt this particular technology, how can they learn in the process.
Right.
There is no question about it.
Basically, there are 4 straight pointers from you as your advice to enterprise CXOs who are looking for major AI transformation. Firstly, get AI ready, have the right data structure in place, the right operating model, etc., so that you are ready to leverage or get benefits out of the power of agentic AI. Secondly, as you said, have a very comprehensive evals and implement a feedback layer so that the signal starts coming. Thirdly, as you said, to ensure the autonomy, decouple intelligence from external vendors. Have your own sovereign agentic intelligence layer so that remains your moat and your sustainable competitive advantage. And fourth, which you mentioned, was design for portability. Do not have a multi-LLM strategy, multi-cloud strategy, so that anything if goes wrong from one vendor or one solution providers, you are not stuck. You have that flexibility, and not even if one solution provider do not go bad, you should have that flexibility to get best out of different models. One use case may be suited by one model, for other maybe other model will work well. So these 4 pointers the CXO should keep in mind when they are planning for their AI transformation journey.
Yeah, just to add here on the last point, right? I typically give this example of a kitchen, right? There are different dishes that you can make, and one dish you cannot eat every day. You will get bored. Same with LLMs. As you were saying, right? One model cannot do all.
Yeah.
Similarly, only if you want to eat only rice, there are again different varieties of rice that are there.
Yeah.
There are different type of dish that you can make out of rice. If you eat always steamed rice, good. Some people would do that. But if you want variety, and if you want if you want to get different kind of things done, then different LLM is a must. It's not a it's not a choice anymore. You have to do it because there are, let's say you want to do voice agents, then probably the text model might not work. Or if you want to do video, probably a very different model would work. There is cost implication, use case implications.
And the way the landscape is changing,
absolutely.
One model provider is at the top this week, next week someone else takes over.
Yeah.
So thank you, Pratap, for sharing this, your advice for enterprise CXOs who wants to make their companies AI native, not just for themselves but the organization in the long run. And this would be helpful for a very diverse range of enterprise leaders. Either they are very early in their AI journey or they have already made good strides, because this is not just to get an immediate value. This is the advice or that architectural implication that you talked about. This will ensure that even if they have not got value in the short run, immediately they need to do, even if they're getting value in the current state, they need to maintain and sustain that value in the long run for their competitive advantage. And coming from you, who has seen this landscape evolve in last 1.5 to 2 years as an operator, as an entrepreneur, makes it more credible. And as you said that you have been having conversations with enterprise leaders across industries, across vertical, across different stages of AI or digital maturity. So all those experiences which you have gained from their learnings, their experience, has come into your insights in the blog and in the podcast. And we hope we connect with more enterprise leaders in the near future and advise them and get them onboarded for an AI transformation journey.
Thanks, Anmol, for this conversation. It was really a pleasure talking to you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. we'll have more of these soon.
Absolutely.